Switching gears here, children are a heritage from the Lord, right? And so let's talk about the sanctity of human life just a minute. When I grew up in a Dutch Reform home. Some parents threatened to send their kids to a Reform school. Mine did, okay? But they didn't give me a choice on whether I was pro-life or pro-choice. They taught me the scriptures that God creates life. God knit us together in our mother's womb. He ordained each day before one came to be. And, so I believed that, but it wasn't until our third son, Lucas, who was born with a very rare brain disorder, left him significantly disabled, couldn't walk, couldn't talk, major seizure disorders. To a lot of society, they would say, abort his life. And yet, that little boy taught us the most powerful sermon for 28 years. And that drove my conviction and my passion for the sanctity of human life. So beyond the talking points, is there a conviction moment for any of you or each of you about this is what drove my commitment to the sanctity of human life?
Well, I think part of the story that I told when our firstborn was really a prayer that had been answered for us, and that was very meaningful. And I'm somebody that's lived through what a blessing it is to have a family, and I reflect on, before we celebrate Thanksgiving, my wife and I on Wednesday are going to celebrate our oldest daughter's 7th birthday. And I started looking back and thinking about, we were married, doing our thing. I was in the Navy. My wife was busy as a TV reporter, and we wanted to have a family. And it didn't happen at first. And so we were trying, and then we eventually took a trip to Israel when I was a U.S. congressman, and we literally went to Shiloh with Hannah's prayer. We went to Ruth's tomb in Hebron, Ruth chapter 4, verse 13, and we prayed. We prayed a lot to have a family, and then lo and behold, we go back to the United States, and a little time later, we got pregnant. But unfortunately, we lost that first baby, and it was a tough thing because this is something that we had so much hopes for, so much aspirations, but we just kept the faith. We just kept praying. We knew that there would be a path that God would lead us on, and lo and behold, short time after, we did it, and we had our first baby girl, and we didn't stop after that. We've got a 5-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter, and we've got a big, full, joyous household. And I'll never forget being in the doctor's office, and they put something over my wife's stomach, and I hear whoosh, whoosh. I'm like, what is that? They're like, that's the heartbeat. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And that was how could you even have a debate at that point?
See, I told Darla he's going to be a basketball player. Swish, swish, swish.
But you look at that, and you're just, that is a separate human being with a beating heart. And I just think about the potential that we have out there with human beings that so many people just want to discard. Not everyone's going to be born into perfect circumstances, right? That doesn't mean that people cannot be successful. That doesn't mean people can't have great contributions regardless of the circumstances of their birth. When we had the debate the other day in NBC, I told the story about a young mother in Jamaica who was pregnant, and everyone was telling her to get an abortion, so she was going to the abortion clinic, and something came over. I think it was the Lord that right at the front door of that clinic turned her around. And so she ended up having a daughter. And look, these are poor people in Jamaica. Some of the talking heads would say, no chance, right? Well, the daughter grew up, got involved in business, and eventually emigrated to the United States. The only reason I know about that story is because that baby girl that was born in those circumstances in Jamaica was somebody that I ended up appointing to the Supreme Court of Florida in 2022. No one would have thought that was possible, but it just shows you the potential of human life. And if we can't stand for a culture of life, then we're not worth very much at all.
Ambassador Haley.
You know, I have always said I'm unapologetically pro-life, not because the Republican Party tells me to be, but because my husband was adopted. And so I live with that blessing every day. And we had trouble having both of my children. We tried and tried and tried and had trouble getting pregnant. And so when you're surrounded by those blessings, you really do see the gift that it is. The gift that, you know, Michael's parents, if they couldn't take care of him, his life still mattered. He still means so much. The gift of my two children, as hard as it was to have both of them. I mean, the blessing that we got from it. You know, I just had one of my girls that works on the team. She just had a baby. And I said, you're not going to believe how big your heart's going to grow. It's going to grow 10 sizes. And so I think anybody who's appreciated that gift of life, you don't take it lightly because you know it's a blessing. And I think that's where mine comes from.
Vivek.
I mean, I was first persuaded just by the logic of it. I was a scientist, or trained as certainly an undergrad to be a scientist. My wife's a physician.
You're kind of a logical guy.
Let's just go. I like logic first, and that's kind of where I usually reason with people who disagree with me on this. We agree as a society. Nobody disputes it. Nobody's going to be protesting on the streets about this to say that life ends on the back end when brainwaves end. Nobody disputes that. Well, if we apply that rule on the back end, then that means life begins no later than when brainwaves begin. That's 5 to 6 weeks. And so the logic of it leads me there. I would say that my faith also leads me there, Bob, is that we believe that God resides in each of us. And I would say God taught us that lesson too. I actually haven't shared this story before, but you asked about a personal experience, and so I'm going to dip below the logic here. So Purva, my wife, you and Darla have met several times now. She is a physician. She's a throat surgeon. That's why she's not here right now. She'll be here tonight in Iowa, but she's protecting life now. She's saving lives at the cancer hospital in Ohio State, and she'll be here this evening. But she began her surgical training in 2015, and that's the year we got married. So that's when she entered her 5-year residency. And so the year we got married, we made a plan. We had it all planned out. Right? She was going to finish her residency. It was going to be 5 years in. And then we were going to have our first kid, and then we were going to have our second kid, and had it all mapped out perfectly. And I'd say God pretty quickly showed us what he thought of that plan when he, about halfway through residency, at the start of her 4th year, blessed us with our first child. And we were ecstatic, actually. And the truth is, I was building my first company at that time. Apurva was working probably 80-plus hours a week. It's supposed to be capped at 80. They work them more in residency. And so we were going through a bit of a rough patch, to be honest with you, just with how much little time we were spending together. That brought us together. We told everybody we knew. We were ecstatic. We told our parents, and we weren't expecting the blessing, but we were grateful for it. We told our family members, celebrated with our friends. We actually bought a journal. We did that every night, and that brought us together. We wrote a letter to our child, what we wanted to impart, what were the stories from our parents and our grandparents we wanted to tell. And about 3.5 months in, you know, Purva, one day she woke up, she said, I'm bleeding. She had a miscarriage. And we lost our first child. And that was the loss of a life. It was our family's loss. And you know Purva, she is probably one of the most upbeat, strong, positive people you will meet. She went into a state of depression after that. And our faith is what got us through it, actually. Our faith teaches us that you know, our child joined his creator, and one day we will too. But it inspired us to now continue trying. Okay, it wasn't part of our plan. Well, we knew we wanted that blessing. We asked for it again. So God gave us that blessing a few months later. And, you know, we were nervous this time, but God wasn't done testing us, actually. So she's a surgeon. She's in the operating room. And this rarely ever happens. It's a rare incident. It only happened once in her career. It was this time while she was pregnant. She's operating. There's a second surgeon, 2 surgeons are operating. She gets a pinprick, draws blood, and, you know, they look at the patient's tests afterwards just to make sure. And what do you know? That patient is HIV and HBV hepatitis B positive. So she goes into antiretroviral therapy, gets the hepatitis B vaccination again. Already had it, the start of her job, get it again. This is not good during your pregnancy, especially when our first one ended the way that it did. And so we were nervous. So I'm traveling abroad for work a few weeks later, maybe about a month or so later. And then I get the call that we dreaded. Poor was on the phone, she's crying. She said she was bleeding. And we'd lost our child in a miscarriage. And the thing that infuriated me also at the time was she couldn't even get an appointment until 3 days later. It was our healthcare system. And so one thing if I know how to do is cut through bureaucracy. I'm abroad. I do what I do, make the phone calls needed. She got an appointment the next day. And I told her to call me after she was out. And so the next day I was waiting for a call. She goes in for the doctor's appointment. I get the call. She's crying. I'm getting ready to console her. And she said they found a heartbeat. That was our son. That was our son, Karthik. We can probably leave him there. And that was alive, right? It's this guy right here. And you can sit up here, you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that that's what gives us our commitment. I mean, yeah, there's the logic of it.
Yeah.
But when you bring life into this world, you protect all life born and unborn. And that's where our commitment comes from. And I think that, you know, God taught us that through a different way than we had planned. But that's where we've landed, and we'll always protect life for that reason.
Vivek, thank you for sharing that story.
Thank you.
Really, thank you for sharing that story.